We often hear camp directors tell us that staff are so different than ever before. Is this actually the case? And if so, what can we do about it? Join Gabz, Beth, and our special guest, Kim Aycock, to hear our thoughts.
Imagine camp registration software that actually gives you more time to do what you love. With UltraCamp, you can effortlessly track attendance, manage staff, streamline registration, and more. Explore now at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. After 10 years of podcasting, is there anything left to say? You bet. Because just like people grow and change, so does our industry. Each and every year, there are new challenges, new ways of handling situations, new advice from those doing the work, and new ideas to share. Our commitment to intentional leadership training has only grown stronger. Join us for season 11 of Camp Code as we once again do all that we can to help you deliver your best ever leadership training. Hello, everybody. And before we dive into this all important topic, we're going to take a quick moment to introduce ourselves. And we're going to start first with our very special guest. So, Kim, can we hear a bit about you, please?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Kim Aycock. I live on the coast of North Carolina currently, and I guess you could say I'm the founder of Kimspiration. That's my business name, and I
Love it.
every Monday like to give my Monday motivation is called Kimspiration. So that's super fun, and I call myself the CCO, the Chief Culture Officer, because I'm very much believe in the culture of our camps, our organizations, and things like that. So, but I didn't start my camp experience until I was in college. I worked with a girls' camp, stayed there for a number of years. Also did some teaching, all kinds of things, but everything always led me back to camp. And so here I am talking with two of my favorite camp people, and we're going to have fun today. I'm excited. Thank you again for having me.
It is our pleasure. And when you call yourself the CCO, you know why you got invited on this show. Exactly for that reason. All right, Gav, let's hear about you for a quick
and Kim, thanks for joining us. I'm so excited you're here. Well, my name is Gabrielle Raill. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm one of the camp directors of Camp Ouareau, which is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains of Quebec, Canada. We run our program in French and English, and we focus on creating a positive environment for girls and gender minorities.
Thanks, Gab. And I am Beth Allison. I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are also she, her, and I'm a camp consultant and trainer, much like Kim, who is passionate about leadership training, even more so than I was as a camp director. And I love all the opportunities and possibilities of prepping for staff training. So, as we've already alluded to, we are very excited to have Kim Aycock join us for this episode. She is absolutely brilliant when it comes to staff training. In fact, I remember the first session of hers I ever attended at a conference years and years ago, and I left with so many notes, and I did my best to implement all of her ideas that summer, and it was wonderful. So, Kim, welcome. We are so thrilled to have you here. All right, so our topic today is staff are not like staff of the past. So first of all, I'd like to ask each of you if you think that's true, and if so, why or why not? So Kim, let's start with you. Have staff changed at all?
So this is a loaded question, I think.
It is a loaded question.
So I'm gonna say, I mean, yes, of course, they're different, but every generation has different staff. Like we have a different perspective than the generation before us and several generations back. And so while the generations are shaped by, the big things that are experiential that have happened to them, or that are common to an age group of people, they can't help that. But it's what we're seeing is the response or the fallout from some of those, like the pandemic, for example, or all of the, the mass school mass shootings and things like that. So we're seeing the fallout of that, but so they've changed because the world has changed, not because they're trying to be these these awful young people. I find this generation so inspiring. And so I think they're different, but despite all the things that they've had to go through. So that's where I'll start with.
Okay. Thanks, Kim. Gab, what about you?
I agree. Every generation has there's world events, World War II in the, late 30s, early 40s, allowed for the hippie rise of the hippies in the 60s. 60s helped have a rise of like, let's make sure we're not poor, let's get money. In the 80s, there's every generation is a commentary on what has happened to their parents and what they experienced growing up. I think the thing is what happens when you're working with a generation that you're not in your formative years have experienced what they experience. A lot of the times what happens is I don't understand them. Like I don't understand what's going on. And obviously that's what we're going to be chatting about a little bit more here. But it's adjusting that compass inside of our minds of from this is frustrating to I need to understand to get a better perspective. And you don't always need to completely understand as if you went through it, but you do need to have a perspective shift so that you can help understand. And every generation does need and benefit from an older generation holding space for them, an older generation to help them reflect. Sometimes when you're in it, you also don't know why you're acting a certain way, or you're not aware of the needs that you might have, or you're very clear about the needs that you might have, and that might be uncomfortable for the people that are leading them. So I think that what I find fascinating, I agree with Kim, and I know that Beth and I have had this conversation many times, so inspired by this generation. And I truly felt that before COVID as well, the sort of sense of activism, the sense of inclusion. Of course, that doesn't exist everywhere, but what I was seeing as a trend was so much more hopeful than when I was that age. So for me, it's like very exciting. And it's kind of how do I create space for them and how do I help them build trust with me when I also do know what I'm doing when it comes to camp and campers. How do we bridge that gap? I think is sometimes what we struggle with a lot, but it truly is an exciting group of individuals that I genuinely am excited to work with.
So tell me a bit more about them. What are they like?
Some are very transparent, I would say. Not as when I was a staff member, we were, for lack of a better word, afraid of our directors. We were afraid of our leadership team. This seems to not exist as much. They're quite not as fearful, which could be good, but sometimes there's a little bit of a respect is sometimes a little bit of a gray area what respect means. More vocal. Also, I think with that more vocal, sometimes that's what brushes up against maybe an older generation because you're like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. But sometimes they're not meaning to be disrespectful. It's really truthfully like they don't agree, but they don't have context. So you have to take the time to explain it to them. Trust is quite low. I do think that has to do with COVID, to be honest, but you really have to work hard.
And the mess the world is in right now, that's not
Yes.
their fault, but ours.
Yes. So
Yeah.
the trust of an older generation is quite low. And that's something I had always had to work for trust. Like I don't want to say I didn't. I really always worked hard for trust, but it's almost like it's even more so. I would say emotional reactions are stronger sometimes, but I would also say that is true of almost everybody, including parents. Those are extreme reactions. Passionate, wants to work with an organization that has a mission, but will also hold that organization to task if they're not following that mission. Requires transparency. Again, that goes back to trust. And I would say yes, anxiety. I don't know if it's gone up. I would just say that we're more aware of it, but I do think in some ways it has gone up. But anxiety, I would say, has gone up. Trust in self, these type of things sometimes has gone down, I would say as well.
Okay. Kim, do you have anything to add to that list?
I think they're very nuanced. Like I think uh they're so unique. Like it's really hard to give like the generalizations of this
Mm-hmm.
generation just because and that's with, I mean, true with any generation. You have to, like, we're making some generalizations, but then
Of
we
course.
know, like, when we're looking at each individual, they have their own unique and special qualities and things like that. But I think they're a little bit more fluid in some of their just identity and who they are and what they believe in. And it's certainly one of the most, when I think of my own niece and nephews who grew up in the middle of America, middle America in Nebraska, very rural, they they went to school with kids from Sudan and from Vietnam and Mexico and all these different places, and so they're such much more diverse
Mm.
than we ever were in terms of, and it doesn't phase them at all. Like they're just used to that. That's the norm for them. And I feel like in that respect, that's such a breath of fresh air because they're so much more into accepting people for who they are, and they want to be accepted for who they are, however they present themselves. I think they're also, they want to be flexible. They want flexibility. They don't want things to be like in a box. And so like schedules are hard for this group. And so they want to, find ways to, have that, work from home or be able to do this and that, and, all the different things that they're interested in.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So I think, finding, like, especially at camp, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little later, like how can we adapt to that, especially if we're a long-term overnight camp, for having flexibility. So I hope we come back to that because I think there's some really great things that I've seen camps that do,
Yeah.
you know, kind of thing. So those would be a couple other things.
Okay.
And I do agree, Gab, that I think they can sniff out when a mission or vision or
Yeah.
values, like whatever you put on your website or you tell them in an interview or having a blog or whatever, they can sniff out if when they actually come to camp, or the difference in the reality and what they think it was based on what they were told earlier or they saw earlier. Like they
Yeah.
just snip it out. Any discrepancy, they're
Yeah.
on to it. So we have to walk the talk, right? And
Right.
so yeah.
They're absolutely looking for us to be genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Oh
and
my
holding
gosh.
us accountable,
Holding us accountable.
which is
Yep.
lovely.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's a perfect place to stop. And yes, Kim, we are going to dive back into these things. So we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. And when we come back, we're going to talk about, so what do we do? How do we best serve them, set them up for success, and support them? We'll be right back. For our Camp Code listeners, here's an exclusive offer to enhance staff retention year-round. Get UltraCamp's staff communication calendar with free customizable email templates at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Remember what drew you to the camp experience? UltraCamp knows it wasn't for the paperwork. That's why they've crafted an all-in-one platform to streamline your program management. Say goodbye to the hassle of learning and managing multiple platforms to run your camp. With UltraCamp, you can easily register and manage campers, generate and direct communication, organize schedules and activities, and process payments and donations. UltraCamp's goal is to help their clients spend less time in the office and more time doing what they love. Want to know if UltraCamp is the right fit for you? They offer free customized demo sessions so you can see their software in action. Sign up at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Okay, so now that we've chatted about staff a little bit and whether or not they are different than staff in the past, and we've agreed that they are, but every generation is different from the one before. So how do we get the best for them and out of them? What tips and tricks have you got? So Kim, let's start with you, please. What do you got? Just give me one thing and we'll come back to you so you don't have to give it all at once.
Okay. So I will say, so I am currently interviewing staff, and I did last year also for the camps that I first started working with in Wisconsin. And last year I interviewed somebody who had got hired at another camp for the previous summer, didn't make it, right? She left partway through, I think it was after pre-camp training or something like that. And so when I interviewed her last year and we had this great conversation and she was very forthcoming about this, the next thing, so I'm curious, like as she gets to camp, what is this going to look like for her? Is this going to be different from the experience she had before? And then I had the fortune of sort of interviewing her on the back end the last week of camp. And I said, I just would love to know what was the difference between this year and last year, if you can pinpoint it. And she talked to me, she used the term, well, she said there was a green flag. And I said, ooh, I know what a red flag is, but what is a green flag? And she said, well, in the interview, you asked me how I wanted to be supported. And she said, that was the green flag for me. So just taking that interest in her and having that conversation with her about, because we're asking our staff to take care of and support the campers, but we as the leadership, camp leadership, it's our job to take care and support the counselors who are taking care of and supporting the campers. And so it's individual, it's very individual. So for her, she had a very specific thing that she needed or and wanted somebody to check up with her on. So she felt like that was super important. And I've just seen that time and time again. Whenever I get to that question in the interview, they're like, oh, wow. It just kind of makes them stop and be like, they really do have an interest in me as a person and the fact that I'm going to be working with children, and it might not be an easy job. So I would start there.
Perfect. Seen and heard and valued. That's what they're looking for. Gab, what do you got?
I sort of going off of what Kim was saying, I was chatting with a returning staff member who is struggling with her interview process. She's a returning staff member. It's her third year. We get along very well. But clearly something else was going on and didn't know how to bring it up. So just in her interview, she wasn't able to make it through, basically. Sort of would get very tongue-tied and then overwhelmed. And in a third attempt, we set up the questions. These are the questions. Do you feel comfortable with this? There's a lot of back and forth. I did have somebody that was, that I talked to sometimes about, my work stuff, like a friend, and they said, for me, I would just give up. Like, this is ridiculous. This is the third time you're meeting with this person. Like, have they given any indication why they're having a hard time? They should take the responsibility and understand that, you have to be professional. And I said, well, part of my job is building their confidence in the workplace. And I'm one of the first places that they truly build professionalism. So I can't expect them to be 100% professional all the time, because the reality is that they're not experienced in that. And that's true before COVID. But I think it's even more so true. And I think that, like we talked about anxiety before, what I've noticed is that anxiety has gone up. And so I think it's also, it's having that meter within your own organization on what can you tolerate time-wise, and having that rubric for your own time, but also for the staff members. And when we did have our third interview, I made sure somebody was with me, so it wasn't just me. So it's maybe a little bit less intimidating, somebody that she knows and feels comfortable with. And one of the things that staff member mentioned was, I know that y'all can read me so well. I feel embarrassed because I can tell that when I'm talking, you can tell that I'm not doing well. So I get in my own head. And this other staff member was with me, who's closer to her age, so she's about 22, just said, do you know that, like, our job is to literally pay attention to micro movements in staff members, and we're there to make sure that you're okay. But other staff members don't notice it, that you actually hide it very well. It's just that this is what we're supposed to pay attention to. And what we value is you just saying, hey, I need a moment, or hey, I'm having a hard time. And once we sort of walked her through that, you could see her calm down and feel good about herself. And I could feel by the end of that third attempt, how wonderful she felt. And it's just the pressure out of the room left. I mean, the Zoom room, but the pressure out of the Zoom room left. And I'm so grateful that I could afford to take, a third interview with her. And so I think that sometimes I also get frustrated, and sometimes I'm like, ugh, you know what, like, who I am. This is, your third year, like, we've gone through it together. Can't you just trust me? And the reality is it doesn't have to do with me. I think sometimes I feel like it does. I'm like, "Ah, I'm so amazing. Why don't you?" But it doesn't. And if you can walk them through that little piece, and if you can sort of hold the space to that point, then, there might be something there. And what I felt was like trust was built. I felt like it's going to be okay. I felt like I got to show her, I have your back. I think you're amazing, but we do also have to go through this interview. My other instinct was forget the interview. F it, like, fine, we know she's going to do great. Let's just have her come to camp. It doesn't matter. But I'm like, no, this is actually an important part of the process. We do have to reflect from last year. We do have to get excited about next year. This is part of our process. This is important, So sort of
And
that
great practice
mindset.
for the staff member
I
for
think
for
so.
future
So
interviews that are not with you.
that's right. So I think
Hmm.
it's having the mindset that we are here to help them learn and build the muscles of being professional, especially throughout the year. I can afford a little bit more time to do that, and I have a little bit more space to do it. And I'm not the end all be all of people. I brought in somebody that I knew got along with her, and clearly it did calm her down. So having that mindset, I think makes a big difference.
Awesome. Thanks, Gab. Okay, Kim, what else have you got?
So I talked about flexibility earlier. I think the camps are starting to figure this out in ways that they can be flexible. I was talking to a day camp not that long ago where they're hiring their, sort of I'll just use the word sort of site director for lack of a better term. And they have 4 different sites in a particular, community. And at each place, they hire 2 site directors, and the one site director is Monday to Wednesday. The second site director is Wednesday to Friday. So they have the overlap of Wednesday together, but they basically have built a 3-day work week for that particular position. And then their counselors are coming for either a morning shift or an afternoon shift, just to make the day not be, from 7:30 a.m. till, you're on till 5:36, whatever, whenever the kids get picked up, that kind of thing. Also seeing where camps are giving choices, like which weeks would you like to work? You pick, 6 out of 8, or, things like that, where they have some sort of a choice. So if they do have that family reunion or that wedding or something like that, like they've already been given permission to miss that week, and then they can come back and be ready to jump in. I know that doesn't work as well with the long-term overnight camps, just because if you're, let's say you run a 6-week program, it's hard to have in and out in like, let's say your cabin groups, your bunk groups or something on that. But they have also, come to the realization that there's some alumni out there and some staff members who have worked with you before who are just such rock stars that if they can only come for a week or 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever, bring them on, because their love and passion of camp is going to just bump up the rest of the community when it might be starting to drag just a little bit, when you're hitting some of those harder moments, in a longer term session. And so I just think, this generation is wanting to be flexible, and I think we dug our heels in for too long that we can't be flexible. And I'd like to challenge that and say we absolutely, I like Gumby. And so it's like being Gumby. It's like, let's be flexible. Let's see what we can do. Let's not say no until we looked at what some of the options are, So, and sometimes you come up with things that are even better than what you had before, just because you're willing to flex that flexibility muscle. So
I
be
agree. And I
Gumby.
do think it was one of the hardest things for me as a camp director, because it does make extra work. And especially when your big focus is community, 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 and then parts of your community go off and different, it's like, I found that sort of difficult to come to terms with. And initially we had, certain staff got family camp off, which was like a 4-day camp in the middle of the summer. And then we added another 4 days. And so people had the choice of that. So that made a big difference to know that they had that break and to know that they were going to go home, but also bringing in alumni and giving staff that week off here and there for whatever reasons they might have needed it did make a big difference. But it took a while for me to think that I liked that idea. I'm going to be honest. Like initially it was
Oh,
like, you're all going home and you're breaking community. And I don't like that. Like it was, you're going to miss stuff. And then we got to bring you back in and, all of those sorts of things. But the benefits of being flexible outweighed all of that for me. But it did take a while.
Yeah, it does take a while, and you have good reason to fret it, because the most important part of building group is at the beginning and
Mhm.
closure. So there, a lot of the middle stuff is important, but how we do the beginning is what typically dictates staff members coming back, if they're integrated properly. And I think that we can be flexible but hold on to the importance. So if you are going to bring people in and out, how are we making sure that formation stage, the beginning, the orientation stage, is well equipped? For our organization, you can choose either the July month or the August month or the entire summer, but there's no in between. And there is also and and the type of roles is predetermined also. So you're still giving flexibility, but within a context of us making sure that we're able to properly create that beginning, middle, and end stages that are really necessary in groups, and in that transition. And we do also have people like what you were talking about, Kim, that one person that fills up that uh, uh, two people that fills up a one person role. And those are typically right now, the people that we're hiring are individuals um, that are just in between their bachelor's and their master's. And so they have to get ready for their master's, but they're not ready yet to leave camp. And so they're coming in for a 4-day work week, and then they have an overlap. So there is ways that we can adjust at sleepaway camps as well. Um, but there's we know what works and what doesn't work. It just means that we have to, you're right, Beth, it does take more work. But if you can
Mhm.
hire that one staff member that actually can't come for the whole summer because they're, maybe they're teachers now, can they be the ones that come in for 5 days to do a training orientation on camp before um before that group starts off, like as camp counselors, and they come in with them and there's a training, but it's while it's on camp, and they can do that for 5 days because they're a teacher. They would like a little money in their back pocket. They'd love to come up to camp, but they just can't commit to the whole summer. I think is sort of, a way of looking at it. And the other thing I would say, especially for sleepaway camp, we don't let anybody we don't let anybody leave at random times, because that can get really emotionally upsetting that you see them. So if there's a group that's leaving, it's at a specific time. It's the same when people arrive, it's at a specific time. So you can sort of control your dates and times. But flexibility is a must, I would say, yeah.
Okay, great. What else have you got? Any other ideas?
I
I
think,
would, oh, sorry, Kim, go for it.
oh, I was just going to say, being the chief culture officer, the CCO of Kim's,
Hmm.
I'm always looking at culture, and I think that is so critical to this. It should have been critical all along, but I think we're seeing, especially now, that just that how you build the community, how you welcome people into the community, all of those things, the culture, and how we get this group of young people to feel like they are a integral, vital, critical piece of our mission, right? And I think that helps with the just the buy-in in general, but helps them connect with maybe what their own personal values are and how they align with what the camp or the organization's values are. And this is where, so I mentioned this in our preamble, I guess, before we got on. So I'm going to share a story about my dog that was, some of you know, was missing for 4 days, 4 nights. And it was very stressful for me and my family, right? And so we didn't know, we had no idea where he was. He was hit by a mail truck in front of our house. And then he got so scared, he just bolted and ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. And so by the fourth night, I'm beside myself because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there is no way I'm going to get him back. My window just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I had been texting with a tracking company, which I didn't even know existed until I got into this adventure that I was on for this week after Thanksgiving. And she was telling me, she's like, okay, if you sort of have an idea, the way you're going to get your dog back is through smell, the sense of smell. That's the best sense that they will be lured back to you. And she said, so I encourage you to set up a grill and start grilling on this particular campus of where we thought in the general vicinity where he might be. And I said, yeah, I don't think that's going to work because I'm sure I'm going to get arrested or something for like just randomly cooking out on this, community college campus. And I said, what's your next thing? And she said, well, I think you should go buy some Kentucky Fried Chicken and sit in a general spot and make it hot. She said, but he'll smell it. If he's in the area, he will smell it. So when I went to the Kentucky Fried Chicken that late afternoon before I was about to set up my little station, the gal who greets me at the counter, she's like, how can I help you? Can I take your order? And I said, yes. I said, I need the best smelling chicken you have because this is the chicken that's going to help me get my dog back who's been missing for 4 days. And she looked at me and she's like, okay, what do you need? Do you want the chicken tenders, the chicken strips, the chicken, the bucket? What do you want? And I said, you're the expert. I need to know from you what's going to be the best chicken. And so she said, definitely the chicken tenders. You need to get the chicken tenders. And I said, okay. I said, how many? She said, you should get 8. And I said, okay. And so I, got my order, paid for it. And I told her, I said, you know what? I'm going to come back when I find my dog. You are going to know because you were a key part in helping me get him back by telling me what kind of chicken to buy, right? Well, it wasn't the chicken itself that got him back to me, but the next day I did get reconnected with him that next day. And I had the chicken ready to give to him because he was so hungry because he'd been gone for 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
But I went back to the Kentucky Fried Chicken place. Like I said I would. The gal wasn't there, but her manager helped me figure out which one it was. Her name was Destiny. Okay, that's crazy.
Stop it.
And I know. And it was her first day on the job. It was her very first day on the job.
Destiny.
And so I know she rocks. But the idea is she was part of the mission. She felt important and critical because I was able to empower her to have that. And I've been practicing it over and over again with the young people that I see just around town, whatever, and it works. It is amazing. So I think we need to really put some thought into how can we get our young people connected to our mission so they feel like they are just so important to it. They couldn't imagine not being at camp. And maybe that you're probably going to ask me, well, what would that mission be, Kim? My thought is like, what is it that they think maybe they were missing in their childhood, or what do they think was hard about being a child themselves? And so now they have that opportunity to make it better for this next generation coming up, right? Or the tail end of their own generation kind of thing. So yeah, I've been thinking a lot about it. And I just, time and time again, you see people smile, you see people stand taller when they have a little bit of an idea of how their contribution matters to the bigger picture. That's what I got for you. How about that?
I love it.
I love that. Gab, anything else?
Well, I would add to those. We talk about mission statement on Camp Code all the time. It needs to start with your mission. And if you have one of those really large, long mission statements that you have to open up a book to read, and you're not in the power of changing it because maybe it's, done by a board or part of a larger entity, you can make a what Beth has talked about often is a mission statement for your staff training. And I like to have the sentence, at Camp Happy Fun, we create an emotionally and physically safe environment so that our campers may, blank this piece. So it's filling in, like, what are we doing? How are we creating emotionally and physically safe environment so that campers can what? And ours is to be their authentic selves. That's what we go with, but you can go and that can really help focus. But I really love what you're saying there, Kim, about asking, answering the question of what they wish they had when they were kids and feeling that, because that's quite a motivator. And I'm really happy you found your dog as well.
Thank you. But
And
I
he's,
think,
yeah,
so many kids are lonely today. So many
yeah,
kids aren't outside today. I
yeah.
mean, just there's so many easy things, regardless of what they might say or think, that you could easily tie that into your mission. So, yeah. So
Beth
I'm
has,
glad.
yeah, Beth has this great activity that she ran or taught me, which was giving your staff a bunch of recycled cardboard and plastic bottles or glass bottles, whatever, like just a bunch of recycled material, and building an actual town. And how does that town like serve your community? And obviously, Beth, you can explain a little bit more, but it certainly got very deep. Do you want to share just a little bit like that activity? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I
It was
do.
a while ago.
It was a very long time ago.
It's
Probably we
great
talked
though.
about that in season 1, but
Yeah.
it's where you break your staff into groups. It's a great opening day of leadership training activity. Break your staff into groups, well thought out and intentional groups that you have
Obviously.
created yourself. And you're asking each group to create a building for part of the town. So a group might get a hospital, one might get a library, one might get a church, one
Yeah.
might get a rec center.
A cemetery was one of
Yes,
them.
we did
Oh,
have a
wow.
group that did a
Yeah.
cemetery. And so they have like an hour to play and really and they will go to town. Sorry for the pun, but they will go to town to create the most creative stuff. Like the things I've seen were incredible, little books on the library shelf and everything. But then they also during that time have to talk about how this building is a metaphor for like a part of the community that they want to build together. So Kim, I heard you laugh about the cemetery and I understand why. But what they did was they created all the things that needed to die at camp and
Oh,
and
wow.
and be buried. So they had like a gate and flowers and little tombstones. And so things were like gossip, stuff like that. They were gone and in
Mhm.
the past, and we were letting them go. But it's just a neat way for them to be able to help talk about what's important to them and how they see camp filling their needs and giving them what they need in order to do their best work and to be their best selves while they're at camp. So it's kind of a fun thing to do. And then at the very end, you just get some long paper, make a big road through the town. And that's where folks can write your mission statement. Whatever it is you come up with for training is on that paper. And then you just keep those buildings because they're all 3D. So keep them and bring one out every so often at a staff meeting and say, so how are we doing with, the hospital? Are we taking good care of each other? Are we taking good care of ourselves? Just to kind of remind you, you got to have a space for all those buildings, but,
Oh, I
and
love.
don't let them make it too big. Like ours were,
Yeah.
2-3 feet high max, but it was also laid out all over, the lodge floor. So it was a
Oh,
really
I love
cool
that.
double activity. So they got to know each other, they got to be creative. And of course they have to share before anything happens. When you get to their group, they have to point everything out to the rest
Yeah.
of the group because that's half the fun, right? They
Mhm.
they really like to brag on all the creativity that their group has come up with. So
And all the details, I'm sure. I mean, thinking through all those little
mm-hmm.
things, but
Yep.
what that says to me is they get it, right? They
Yeah.
know what a community is supposed to,
Yes.
and they are craving that. They want to be part of that. And so being in that, being able to have um be an integral part of creating
Yeah.
that community is just so empowering for them. So I love
And,
it.
And I think it lets you as a camp professional, as a director, whatever role you might have, is also it allows you to actually have quite a simple activity when it comes from a logistical standpoint. So the headache is quite low, but it allows you to be pleasantly surprised by
Mhm.
them, pleasantly surprised by their ideas and their insight. And trust obviously does go both ways. And I think from what I hear from a lot of teachers and parents and camp professionals, you know, sometimes we're going it through it as well. You know, camps are struggling as well, and so sometimes it's hard to feel that trust because this generation, you really have to prove yourself, I feel, before they're saying I get it. And so the defenses can go up. So this is a
Yep.
beautiful activity where you can be reminded on how wonderful and thoughtful a lot of your staff members are. And maybe there are some yellow or orange flags you see, but you may also see some really beautiful green flags all over the place
Mhm.
and be inspired by it. I really enjoyed that activity personally. And I think if I was to run it this summer, the way I would do it is probably throughout the course of staff training, as we've seen that a compacted training doesn't work. Many breaks are really important. So this is a really wonderful way to break up your afternoon where you do a session and then you go off and you do some crafts, you know, for 45 minutes and then you come back and you do something else. I think it's a really wonderful way of allowing them to have a project that they see evolve over a couple of days during your staff training and then present it near the end.
And it's a great way to get rid of all that stuff
Yes.
in your arts and crafts building that people have donated over the years and you don't know what to do with. You just put it all out and let them go for it.
Forever the camp director,
Oh,
Beth.
yeah, we've
Now,
never experienced that, I'm
What?
sure,
no. The other thing, I did it years later, probably 10 years later, I did it again, but this time, and I had them do our camp. So they did an eagle eye view of our camp and what each of the areas represented and how what we're teaching to kids in each of those areas, what skills they're getting out of it, hard and soft. And it was great because not only did it serve that purpose of them doing something together in a small group, getting to know each other, being creative, and they were amazing. We had a little zip line. The guy actually went down the zip line. Like it was incredible what they came up with. But it was also wonderful for new staff because they had this like 20 by 20-foot thing in the middle of the floor and they could see where everything was on site. So it actually worked double. And it was quite nice to do it that way too. So doesn't really necessarily fit into today's topic, but I just thought I'd throw it in there in case you're like, oh, how do
I
I
love
do
it.
how do I do a good camp tour this year?
I
There's
love
one
it.
idea. Okay. Anything else before we wrap up? And no is a perfectly fine answer.
I have two little things.
All right, please go
Um,
for it.
I would say in the spirit of also building trust and things that have changed. Um, I'm really intentional about telling staff members what's next, especially before they come to camp. So after an interview, being very intentional, saying you're going to get an email with these bullet points outlined, because we need your references. And then in our second interview, we actually say, hey, good job. You did some of the references, but not all of the references. Here are some questions we have for you to help move that along. And the next step is this, where you get to meet somebody from Camp Ouareau. They're a returning staff member. It's a place just to ask you random questions. But we try to give them something to do almost at least like once a month, or depending on when we hire them. Um, Building the relationship before camp is integral to not losing our staff members throughout the summer. They've put so much energy in during that time, that, and not energy that's, for, forced training or anything like this where they're not getting paid. If they're coming, we'll pay them if there's a training, but being connected is really important, but also letting them know what's next. And then I would say it's also making things as easy as possible. So we've created one of my teammates, Alex Ndivier, created a really wonderful website page that's just called the Staff Hub, and it really highlights what are the things that you need to get done, but here are also some cool things that are happening. And so it's all in one place so that staff members that don't have to go through their email system. We just say, hey, get onto the Staff Hub. You're going to see what these 3 things are that you need to fill out. So I think sometimes there's like some resistance of, I don't want to handhold. it's not hand holding. It's building trust, and it's saying, I've got you. When people come to your camp, we would never just say, if somebody said, where's the bathrooms? We would never say, oh, make a right, turn left, go around the oak tree, say hi to the dog, hop over the pond, and then there you are, there's a bathroom. We would walk them there. That's the same that we need to do with staff members when they're filling out documents, or even just keeping their interest from the time that they're hired until the time that they come to camp. It's prime opportunity to build trust, and it's prime opportunity to build those green flags that Kim was talking about, where they're like, wow, that was a green flag. Like they said, hey, you're going to get an email with some bullet points outlining our conversation. Feel free to answer or not. It's just coming your way. That's going to be a green flag for somebody. And we should be aiming for green flags. That's our job. That's what our job is, to hire staff. Our job is to keep staff. That's the way to do it. So I would say the what's next and making things easy for staff before camp is really helpful.
Well, and they're just so incredibly busy. I've tutored college students, and we've been on Zoom and we've gone into their email system because they're trying to look up an answer to something that I've asked them about, and I'll see like 10,000 unread emails, and I'm like, 10,000, what in the world? And it's just like they get bombarded through their colleges and universities with every little thing, don't park here on Tuesday because of this, or, remember this group is going to be on campus today, and, all the things. It's just too much. It's too much, too much, too much. And so simplifying it, connecting the dots. I'm totally with you, Gab. All about it, and asking them what's their preferred method of
Exactly.
communication.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah. And I've also started, in the interview, somebody sort of gave me a little hint about this, and I've been testing to see if it's actually true. But I don't know if you noted, like when I watch TV now or movies or whatever, the subtitles come across the screen, and for
Yeah.
me that's frustrating because I read fast, and so now I'm like ahead of the people who are talking. But so many people, and it is a thing, like subtitles. Like if you look at TikToks and all the different, reels and things, they have subtitles because so many people don't turn their sound on, especially if they're in a place where it'd be like annoying to somebody else to have your sound on, or, there's all kinds of different reasons. And so I've been taking this little piece of advice to using it to help them visualize certain things. So like sharing my screen multiple times during the interview to show them the camp map so we can talk about certain things. Are they going to remember that map when they get to camp? Probably not, but they're going to be able to at least remember, oh yeah, we talked about, she mentioned that there's an upstairs to camp and a downstairs to camp because there's a big hill that you have to go down to get from the, sort of the land to the water kind of thing. Showing the schedule so they can see it, but talking about it with them, because so many times on our websites we put the camper schedule, but that's not what the staff schedule is.
100%.
Go through it with them and say, okay, this is what the camper's day looks like, but this is what you're doing. This is what your job is when the bell rings at 7:30, or this is what your role is when you're in the lodge at a meal. And so we can have those conversations, and they see it right in front of them. And so it's not this, like they're trying to imagine in their head, they actually have it in front. So that's one thing I've definitely been, and I nobody said, oh, Kim, that's great. I really appreciate it. But you can just tell they're much more engaged in the conversation.
I was just going to say, Kim, that's great. No, it's absolutely brilliant. I think like showing things, and it's also we're we're a neurodivergent population. I won't tell you how many unread emails I have. Beth has seen. It's more than 10,000 though. I'll just let you know it's much more than 10,000. This is neurodivergent, but I think like just that is so, it's so helpful. And I think and I have a graphic design background, and I'll just say, like in graphic design, some of the language that we talk about is there's a mental leap, mental gap, and a mental glide. And what you want to aim for is a mental glide. And the mental glide is you see something, you get it. That information, like it's a glide. A mental leap is when you say, apply for a job, but you go to somebody's website and it's probably a camp name that's really hard to spell. And then to find the job, you have to scroll somewhere and then, oh, you found that. And then you have to scroll that's a mental leap. And so a lot of the times when I'm talking to camp directors, are like, well, it's all written. And I get that sort of feedback about when they're talking to families, they're talking, oh, it's all written. And I'm like, well, you're creating a mental leap or a mental gap. Mental gap is like it's shorter, it's easier, but you still can you get to the glide. And what do you want? Do you want your staff to read the stuff and understand it and get there, or do you want you to be frustrated? But the goal should always be, whether it's your staff, your families, what's the mental glide that you can create? So showing visually on Zoom, like here, like let me show you these things. This is creating more of a glide experience for your staff.
Oh, I love that. And I even think like showing them, like if the leadership pictures are on the website, like showing, because you're the one person interviewing them. So I'll say, okay, this is me, but you're going to get a contract from this person.
Yeah.
And you're going to be in touch with this person because they're going to help you with the internet, the visa that you need to have and your travel plans and all of that. So that's another way just to help them, see if they have a name and a face together. I think that's just
so many green flags. I love it.
All right, Gab, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm good.
Famous recap.
I'm nervous because I'm in front of Kim, but it's okay.
Oh my gosh, Gab, come on.
This is a place to hang out, have fun. Okay, everybody. Guess what? World War II was 39 to 45, and stuff was definitely changing. Every 20 years, a good old generation says, hey, I want things to be better. And how can we fault them? They have experiences that we didn't experience during our formative years. This is camp tradition, everybody. Every 10, 5, 15 years, a group changes and tells us to pay attention. And that's what we're trying to do. And here are some of the ways you can do that. One is to come in with a supportive mindset as well as a training mindset. This is a place where it's maybe their first job and they're learning how to do that. So we get to teach them how to do those things. And when we're teaching them, hey, this is how you show up to an interview, et cetera, make sure that you're also checking your own bandwidth and making sure that this fits in with your organization. But also remember flexibility, just like Gumby, who I had to look up, but it looks like a green bendy guy. So, okay, cool, good to know. And so flexibility, like Gumby, is really, really important because you know what? You're probably going to find some really beautiful gold nuggets on how to make your organization better. For example, in my organization, our alumni participation has gone up probably about 70%, and all of them, and I mean all of them, are welcomed. Not some like those alumni that we're not loving at our organizations. They are fantastic because they have purpose. And why is purpose important? Because it's what you need to do with your staff. Help your staff figure out, hey, what is our mission? Why are we trying to do this? And what do we want to provide those campers, what maybe I didn't have when I was a kid that I needed? And that's going to help build trust. And you know why trust is important? Because when there's trust, then they're going to tell you when things are wrong, though they will tell you anyways. But maybe they'll have trust that you're actually going to fix it, which is really, really, really nice. And while you're doing that, maybe put some good energy at the beginning of camp, staff training, but also hiring. And holding their hand is not holding their hands in a negative way. We hold hands when we're walking with our kids across the street. We hold hands when we care about somebody. So holding hands with your staff member to get them to camp, make sure they feel safe and secure, is a positive thing. And maybe last but not least, ask your staff members, hey, what are we missing? You're the expert. Tell me. So then you can build trust the other way. And that's my recap for today.
Thanks, Gab. Brilliant
Bravo.
as always.
Holy.
All right. So as we wrap up, how can you get involved? Well, you can tell us your thoughts on this episode and any episode on social media using the hashtag Camp Code. You can tell us any topics you would like us to discuss, any brilliant guests like Kim Aycock that you recommend we have on the show, any great leadership training tips you have to share. We would love to hear from you because we are all about sharing in this industry. And if you found our podcast to be useful, we would love it if you could leave us a rating or a review in your podcasting app. And here's how you can contact each one of us individually. So Gab, if they wanted to learn a bit more about you or contact you, what would they do?
They can contact me at info@ouareau.com, OUAREAU.com, and that inbox is sparkling clean. And you can check out where I work at ouareau.com.
Great. Thanks. And Kim, if they wanted to find you, is there any social media stuff that you would like to share?
My website is Kim Aycock, AYCOCK.com, and you can email me through there. But my Kimspiration, if you'd like to be Kimspired each week. Monday's a Kimspiration video, Wednesday's a quote, and Friday is something. It's Fun Friday, and you never know. But I had a green flag on my Friday fun photo last week. Surprise. So and that's Kim _ Aycock, again AYCOCK _.
Thanks, Kim. And I follow Kim on Instagram, and it's totally worth a follow. Okay, so you can find out more about me at gocamp.pro, or you can email me directly at beth@gocamp.pro. And for our next podcast, we're going to be sharing ideas on how to sneak all the basic skills into an already jam-packed leadership training. And our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training. And again, we would love to hear some of your most effective tips, and you can either send them directly to us or put them out into the world using the hashtag Camp Code. And this week, we're going to take full advantage and get our best practice from Kim.
So I'm going to share something that I just created this month, okay? But I had an inspiration from somebody else. My friend, Dr. Deb Jordan at East Carolina University, we were talking about this whole idea of introducing staff like to the reality of working at camp and what that looks like. And one of the things she came up with is she was talking about even like the senses of camp, like not just what camp looks like, but what does camp feel like? What does camp smell like? And so her little brain went to, oh, those scratch and sniff stickers. And so I took that and ran with it, and I've created a handout that I'd be happy to share a link to in the show notes. But it says a sense, SENSE in quotes, of camp. So this is a little way for people who are new to camp and are returning to camp, because would be nostalgic, right? But just giving them a little sense of camp through sense, SCENTS, with the scratch and sniff sticker. So you can give them a little bit of what is a pine tree, a campfire, a taco bar, maybe that's one of our favorite camp meals or whatever, a rainbow, because it smells like what it smells like at camp when just after you have a rain, that kind of thing. But it gives them a little bit of information about camp, but through their nose. So I will be glad to share that.
Great. Thanks, Kim. And we will put that link in our show notes so you can find it there. Well, that was quite the podcast today. Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network, and you can check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. And this year, check out our new one called The Pudding with Dr. Mandy Baker and Travis Allison, as they share scientific proof to improve staff recruitment and retention. And you will find The Pudding in the Camp Hacker podcast feed. So from all of us here at Camp Code, thanks for the listening, friends.